Hi, this is the Codewalker nightly build note video for July 19th. First, launch Codewalker. One of the first things you'll notice is now there is a release notes section that explains everything that just changed in the latest version. As I flesh this out a bit, I will probably add a scrolling field here or something like that to have all of the release notes so you can see everything. The interface for Codewalker is very simple. You have little close boxes that you can click, and everything that you can close is a button somewhere in the user interface. So close that, and we can reopen it by clicking Release Notes. So the first thing we need to do is add some source code. This is the path to a source code file. And I'm going to click the Load button, and it generates this. Codewalker has walked all of the code and generated this graph, this tree, of what that code looks like. Now, before we get too much farther, let me show you the actual code that we're looking at. It looks like this. It's fairly straightforward. I say fairly straightforward. It's actually, despite its simplicity, it is not straightforward at all. There are no comments in this code, and you can't really tell where anything goes because it's out of order. This is pretty normal for most source code. So let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. This is what the code actually looks like. Now, what you're seeing here is, and I'm going to hit the letter G to zoom in and the letter F to focus on the current selection, which is the start function here. If we look at the source code, we'll see here is our start function. In the source code itself, we'll see that there is another function called function with loop, and it sets the username to Timothy. But as you can see here, there's quite a bit more. And the reason for that is that what Codewalker does is it walks through all of your code and figures out how it all fits together. So we're going to do something here to make this look a little easier on the eyes and kind of explain this visually. We're going to open the View window and click on Calls, and then close the view window. Now, what this does is any time that a function is called from somewhere else, it will show that, and it's going to colorize all of the functions slightly different colors. So if we go down here at the very bottom and we zoom in on this one, this is called function with logic. And if we look for that same color elsewhere, we'll notice that sure enough, there it is. There's function with logic. There's function with logic. It's all that same color. Because this graph here, this tree at the very bottom, is identical in all of these other trees. And that's what we're trying to show, is how all of this code fits together. So what you'll notice here is start has one red branch here, and then it immediately goes to this kind of bright green color here. Your colors may be different. If you open the view window and you click colors, every time you click it, it's going to change the colors to be slightly different. But what it will do is leave, it will make sure that all of the functions have the same color throughout. Okay, so this one, what is this one? This is function with loop. We'll notice that function with loop is the same color as it is up here, where it's being called by start. Now, one thing about the selection, it has two buttons at the bottom. The one on the left is collapse, and the one on the right is uncollapse. I don't have official names for this just yet. We're going to click the collapse button, and you'll see that it has done that. And what this does is it sucks all of the other node data into that node and hides it. So we're going to do that for each of these. You can also use the keyboard to navigate using the arrow keys. You can use left, right, up, down, and furthermore, and this will walk, by the way, a hierarchy, so you can walk up and down the tree like this. If you hit Alt, left, or right, it will collapse or expand any given node. Okay, so we've collapsed everything except the start function. In our source code, that simply looks like this. At this point, it would be up to the programmer, if they didn't have comments and if they didn't know the way around the code, to figure out where things are going by selecting text and then searching for it, and then selecting the next piece of text and searching for that. Okay, that's down here at the bottom. And then this one is over here, but it calls this one. Well, this is a lot easier to see how this all fits together. You can just basically walk through this. So we're going to do that. Start calls function with loop, and it has a loop. We can see it's I through 10. It's going to call some function with logic, and since it's a different color, this tells me that it's actually calling a different function. Now, I know that I've named these with the word function, but that was intentional so that this is a little easier to understand and follow. So this keyboard navigation is what I'm using right now to move around in this, and you can very easily see how the flow of this code works. Now that's using the view calls coloring. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is look at the heat map. And what the heat map does, oh, before I continue, normal is just gray, white and gray and black. Okay. But heat map, this is an interesting one. This is going to take all of the code and figure out where it is not calling any kind of loop. And then as you get farther and farther down into looped data, it's going to color it, it's going to change the color until it gets to red. And when you're in red, this tells you that you're at the extent of the looped data in your code, which in some cases may be a performance issue. And that's the idea behind this, is to show you how your code, which normally, again, looks like this, some of it is being called far more often than other pieces. And there's no easy way to tell that from looking at the code. In fact, even if you're using performance monitoring software, you might not notice it if that code doesn't execute. With Codewalker's heat map, it very obviously shows you where that is. So you can just go over here and say, oh, well, obviously, this is everything after this loop. These are the heavier parts of the code. Okay, so that is how that works. That's the heat map. Next we have search, and search is fairly straightforward. If you type in a search, you type in anything. Let's say that we're looking for all the for loops. We could type the word for and hit the word search, and it's going to show me with a big red arrow all of the places in that code where we're calling a for loop. Okay, and if we look for if, a conditional, we could do that and it would show all of those. And I can hide just the fors, and then I can hide the ifs. See how that works? It's really simple, really straightforward. That's the idea. Then variables. Well, we only have one variable in this class. I tried to make this example as easy as possible. And let's see if we can find everywhere in the code that it's being used. So we click the visible button, and voila. Instantly it shows us all the places in the code where that's being used, even if they're not being called from the same function. So if you were to search here for everything including the word username, you would have to search through each of these to get an idea of exactly where it is. But you wouldn't really get an idea of where it was being called with it, for example, from start. You might not realize how many times that's being called, or even where it's being called from there, without actually just walking through this yourself. Function with loop goes to here. Function with logic goes to here. No, it doesn't. It goes down to here. This we call our username. Okay, or you could look at it here in Codewalker, and you can see instantly where it is. And you can change the, obviously you change the colors of everything by simply going back to those windows and changing the color. So here we can see, in this case, username is being called from all of these places. And for any piece of code, you can click Info, and it will give you the original line of code and where it can be found in the source code file. It also gives you a type, but that's an internal, it's an internal thing at this time. It basically just tells us what type of node this is, whether it's a condition or a class or a function or what have you. And if you want to reload the source code at any time, you can obviously do that. You can just go here and reload it like that. So we're going to turn off our variables and hit load again. And it reloads everything for us. Or you can load something new, obviously. And that is how this works. This is version 1.0. What did we say this is? This is 1.0.0.1 for July 19th, 2018. My name is Chilton Webb. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.